But as we're talking about stuff that goes on your head, I'll give you kind of what I usually do, and then I'm going to go back to my disclaimer that this just depends a lot on you. So, when I'm traveling, I'm usually going to be wearing something thin like this. That's just this is a silk balaclava. I have ones that are made out of a couple of different materials. But the really nice thing with this is that it just fills in the gaps. So if you've got a high collar up and you've got your hat that comes across your ears, and then maybe you've got your face mask on and your goggles, there's always a gap no matter what you do, and this will fill that in for you. Plus it gives you an extra layer of warmth. So that's the first thing to go on. Next thing that goes on if it's cold is one of these neoprene face masks. So I always alter these. You can find these just about anywhere that sells outdoor stuff. They're just a super simple Velcro on neoprene thing. But they always just have these tiny little holes in the front. I always chop them out to make those just a little bit bigger. I find that they don't get as wet that way. So this way, when this is on, I've got sort of, clear breathing holes for my nose and also for my mouth. And that's just, I found that makes the rest of it get a lot less wet, and I haven't noticed a big temperature difference. So that's that for me while I'm traveling. And again, that might come off anytime I'm out of the wind and just flip back on anytime I am in the wind. And I just go for a normal hat. Doesn't matter too much to me what that is. Anything that's warm, but I do almost always add a windproof earband. I found that almost no hats actually cut out the wind, and if they do, then my head doesn't vent, and so I get really sweaty. So the sweet spot for me is windproof earband. I have super sensitive ears. I hate wind in my ears. That cuts that out for me, and then the hat on the top. And then if I get hot, I can just take that hat off. Sometimes pulling off the face mask or the balaclava, depending. There are obviously lots of different ways to do this. So Allie will use one of these. My wife uses one of these a lot. So she'll just sort of double this up, and she'll put it so that it's over her ears and over her face, but her head is open because she's the sweatiest creature on planet Earth when it comes to things like that. They also will make some of these face masks that have the neoprene part and then like a fuzzier sort of neck cover. If freezy breezes around your neck are a big problem for you, something like that might work better for you. And then when I'm hanging out at camp, I always bring just a big bomb-proof hat. I'm not worried about sweating anymore, so I want something that's windproof and that's just over the top, big, fluffy. The balaclava might stay on, but this might get added. I might have to put the face mask on too. But something that's over the top warm. Almost all of us own one just ridiculous hat that every time we put it on, we feel like a moron. Winter camping might be the time. It might be the place. But again, you know your head and you know your temperature better. So for Allie, who's a hothead, something like this actually works better. So big, fluffy hat. Still covers the head, still ridiculously warm, but it's got a hole at the top. So you can be wearing this and you can kind of have it folded over so that there's, it's acting just like a hat. But if you get too hot, you can just sort of open it up at the top so that you can let some air in. That can be a really nice thing. So again, figure out based on your own temperature and your own experience with things what you're going to want to be wearing. And everything I just mentioned is layers too, and that's a big factor. I am going to dip into sleeping really quick just to mention, because it is a little bit specific with what you're bringing. Sleeping, your base layers, it's just going to be a matter of what you want to be wearing, right? But one thing a lot of people who are new to winter camping with really struggle with is figuring out what to do with your head and your face. So when you're in that sleeping bag, you want to do your best to not be, so you can cinch up the hood of a lot of sleeping bags, but you don't want to be breathing into that hood as much as possible, because when you do that, moisture is going to accumulate and it's going to ice up. So the classic is I'm one of those people that breathes in my sleeping bag a lot. I flop around, so I wind up like sideways breathing into my hood all night. And usually by about day 2 or 3 of a winter camping trip, I'm like hacking my way into my sleeping bag because the hood's frozen over the course of the day and I have to like bust it up so that I can crawl into my sleeping bag. not the best. So something that'll allow you to keep that a little bit looser is to go to bed with a hat on. I like something that doesn't have any ties or tassels because it stays comfy no matter what. And then a really big balaclava. So there's a couple of versions of this, but basically an executioner's hood made out of polar fleece. I really like this one with no bells and whistles. I can't remember if my grandma sewed this or my dad sewed this, but it is simple as simple can be. It looks like 1 or 2 pieces of polar fleece. It might even just be one. And then seam sewed onto the front of it. But so the trick here is that you're just going to put this on over the top and you have this fluffy, warm thing in front of your face. So sometimes I'll pull this down so that I can breathe in and out of it. But, you know, everything else is covered and I've got this nice cozy situation. And if the air is too cold, right, so it's still hurting my lungs and my nose is getting, numb, then I'll pull this up so that it's out in front of my face so that when I'm breathing, some of that warm air is circulating around my face. But I've still got that exchange happening this way, and then I don't have to use my sleeping bag to do that same thing. They make fancier versions of this. I know my grandma sewed this one, where there's the ability to cinch down. So this one she sewed, you can cinch in. So you can make this space smaller. You can cinch it up really tight over your nose so that you're only breathing through this one portion, and then the other part's got your chin covered. These are really nice if you want to just commit to, I need my face warm, I want warm breath throughout the night, and it's fine if this thing gets wet. Especially if you're on maybe just a single overnight or something like that, that might be totally fine. And it might serve you well to be warm in that environment and not have to worry about it. So different things like that. Obviously with this one too, you can just tuck it under, so not a big deal. But something like that is going to be hugely important. You can buy them for a lot if you have a friend that sews. I know there's patterns online, and you can get the simple ones for pretty cheap. That's made a huge difference for me sleeping happy. Hat stuff. Mittens. Gloves and mittens. So, one thing that is so important winter camping that if you're a first timer you might not think about is going to be having a base layer for your hands. It sounds kind of silly, but for me, basically, this layer goes on. It's kind of gross, but it barely ever comes off. So the idea here is that whatever glove you're wearing or mitten you're wearing, whatever activity you're doing, inevitably you won't be able to do something. You're trying to zip that zipper, you're trying to tie your strings, and it's just not working. So what do? You take off your gloves. Well, what is that you're still wearing something? So you need a pair of gloves that you can still articulate with. It's going to take you a little longer to do everything, but it's winter camping. You don't have anywhere else to be. You need a pair of gloves that you can do things like that, but that stay on your hands. So you're not ever fully exposing your skin to cold air, wind, whatever it is. They also add a good bit of temperature to whatever else it is that you decide to wear in your hands. So this is an absolute must. I would say this is one place, spend a few bucks on it instead of getting that $5 pair or that dollar store pair that are thin but they're just kind of useless. Go to REI and get a pair of jogging gloves that are really tight to the skin. These are just made out of some form of polyester. They wick really well. I've never had these get uncomfortably wet, other than like sticking my hand in a puddle, but I deserved it. So when I'm out moving around, I love gloves. Some people hate gloves. I'm hot-handed and I really like to be able to move them around individually. So I will actually almost always wind up skiing in just an insulated pair of leather gloves. A lot of people will call me crazy for this, but this is my normal go-to. They're pretty windproof. They're my work gloves, so I'm used to using them, and I'll snowshoe or what have you in these. I do recommend, even if this is not what you're planning on wearing when you move around, that you bring a pair of insulated leather gloves. If you're going to be doing stuff with fires, it's just hugely helpful to be able to grab the pot off the stove without burning yourself. So this is just, I got these at Menards for I think $10. Insulated leather gloves, Fleet Farm, anywhere that sells those will work great. I am in the minority with wanting to do most of my activities in gloves. Allie usually uses these. These are just sheepskin lined leather mittens. So this is what she'll spend her time skiing in. I would just caution you to figure out what it is that works for you. If you know you've got hot hands, that's one thing. If you know you've got cold things, that's something else. Make sure that you're planning for that. You can always size up the gloves that you buy and add a layer of insulation. So Fleet Farm, a lot of places like that, they'll sell choppers and then they'll sell chopper liners. So chopper liners are just going to be these wool mitten liners. This is something you could add to just about any mitten. So you buy these in the size that fits your hand, and then you size up the glove or the mitten that you buy so that you can add that full extra layer. I have huge hands, so doing this is going to be tougher. But so you have the ability to add that extra layer of insulation. They're really inexpensive, so that's a great way to add warmth to whatever your plan may be. I travel in these. Once I get to camp, those only work when my heart's pumping hard. So once I get there and I'm setting up tents and things like that, I have a nice pair of gloves that I like to use. These are skiing gloves. These keep my hands warmer, but they're still articulated enough that I can do stuff around. My dad is a big believer in just going straight to his bomb-proof gloves, which are going to be the level up from there. I bring a pair with me. I rarely use them, but I have them with because I know that gloves are not as good as mittens. So I will bring this pair with me. Some trips I never use them. And if I do use them, it's just sitting around the fire. But so my dad goes straight to these. When he gets to camp, these go on, and he just takes his time and does it with mittens on. And if he can't, then he pulls his hand out. He's got his gloved hand, and he goes to it. He swears that by having his hand nice and hot in here, and then taking that couple of seconds with just the liner glove on, overall his hands are warmer. And I'm the other way around. So totally depends. These are just kind of the same concept we talked about with clothes. They're a shell, and inside you've got your insulation layers. So these have, if I can open these up here, these have 2 mitten liners in them right now. So 2 layers of wood, or 2 layers of wool, excuse me. Sometimes I up that, so I'll put 1 more in there. Again, just, I'm not a good mitten user, but these will be a little bit expensive. If you go to REI or someplace to buy these, they're generally not super cheap. I'm trying to see, these are Banana Equipment, a size extra large. So, slightly expensive usually. Sometimes though you can find, I found these at Fleet Farm, and they're like military supply place again. Used, they're insulated. I just add the extra layer of insulation. These are a little small for me, so I got them for Allie. But you add the extra layer of insulation. They're insulated themselves, so now you've got those 2 thick layers of mittens plus the shell. These will keep you quite warm too. The big thing you'll see with all of these is that they go up your arm and they have the cuff. Really nice if you've got to, dig in your tent or whatever, and you need to just be using your hands in the snow. It's hugely important that you don't have a situation where you've got snow going in your cuffs. We all know with playing as little kids that snow down the cuffs happens, but it can be really, really bad when you're winter camping. Because if you get snow down your cuff, it melts. Now you've got wet gloves or mittens, and that can be super problematic. It can, at best, it's the difference between being comfortable and uncomfortable, and at worst, it can be really dangerous for your limbs. So making sure that we've got stuff that has the right cuff, and taking our time. Okay, feet. So, that phrase I was using about it all depends on you and your warmth? Feet are going to be hugely that way. So I can walk around in uninsulated hiking boots when a lot of people in my family are running around in mucklucks and they've got cold toes, and I don't really understand what the problem is. As long as I'm moving, I'm a hot-footed person. When I sit down, that's when I get cold feet. You just gotta know this about yourself. So I did one trip where I used my hiking boots as my main transportation shoes. So strapped those into my snowshoes while I was doing stuff. And those worked great. Loved them, super happy. But what I brought with me as my around the fire boots were my mucklucks. Trick with mucklucks is that they keep your feet really warm because they let your feet move. And because your feet are moving, you've got more blood circulation, your feet stay warmer. They suck for sitting around a fire. Really bad. They don't have enough insulation on the bottom. So when your feet are on the frozen ground and it's 20 below, you're gonna have cold toes. So I spent one winter camping trip with my dad and family just constantly like walking around the campfire. And I was pretty seriously unhappy. So the next year, I wound up using these as my travel boots. So I put these, I had different snowshoes, they had better binding so I could use them with these. So I used these as my travel shoes, put those in my snowshoes. Life was awesome, and I went up for my around the fire boot. Generally speaking, you're going to have two sets of shoes. You're going to have something that you travel in, and you're going to have something that you use when you're around camp. My dad skis, so if we're anywhere in deep powder, he's on his skis. I suck at skiing. So if I'm hauling a sled, me skiing, it's like being on a treadmill. I just don't go anywhere. Dad's an excellent skier, so he's usually hauling his polka sled with skis. So for him, it's ski boots. Those are the thing that he's using as this layer. I've had a couple of ankle injuries, so something that's got a little more structure to it has been important in the last couple of years. I think last year this is what I used as my travel boots. So these are Salomon insulated hiking boots with Thinsulite. These work great. I can snowshoe in them, I can hike in them. Made the mistake of using them before I broke them in, and that was exceptionally uncomfortable. So again, same rules that go for any summer stuff. You got to make sure that it's broken in and you've tested it. And that's going to feed back into socks, because you need to know how many layers you need to be warm and what you can be comfortable with. So I know for both of these things that I'm at my most comfortable when I've got 1 to 2 layers of wool socks. So if I'm anything above 0, then I'm just doing one nice thick pair of wool socks. I've got them broken in, I don't get blisters, life's good. If it gets a little bit colder, then I can go with a thinner pair of wool socks, followed by a thicker pair of wool socks. Life's good. If you're somebody who gets blisters and you know that, bring liner socks. Use them. If your shoes are a little bit bigger, bring those bigger socks, right? Something that's thick and puffy. My grandma knits. I always bring these with for my sleeping bag. If I get cold toes in the night, I stick these big bad boys on. They don't fit in my shoes. Right? I brought them with one year because I thought, if my toes get cold, I'll just put those on. Well, by the time I cram them in my shoes, my feet are cramped. So experiment with your layers and try them. An investment I finally made this year was getting big bomb-proof around the fire boots. Previous to that, I just used like a Sorel type of boot, sized up a size, so they're a little bit big, and I could fit some socks like this in there. These claim to be good down to, I don't know, it's like negative 120 or something hilarious. Come on! Good boy. Good boy. So these do have removable liners, which is huge important as far as being able to deal with keeping things dry and drying things out. Good boy. Nice boot liner. Same thing with mucklucks. These have a removable liner. And with these shoes, they've got the removable insole at least comes out. Something that's a challenge if you don't have a hot tent is keeping these things dry. So boot liners are great to put in your sleeping bag with you. If you're somebody who does the leg pillow thing, they can work pretty well for that. But otherwise, they just go down and hang out in that dead space by your feet. Then they'll be warm, flexible, and drier in the morning. So that can be a big thing, but that's a must. If you're getting boots, you gotta have the removable liners, because otherwise by day 2 you're gonna be really sad. Okay. Hats, mittens, socks, shoes. I think it goes without saying, but no cotton socks. You're just gonna be sad. Socks are a place to overpack too. So whatever's going on, you want dry socks. So if you've got a hot tent or a cabin or someplace that you're staying where you can dry socks, then that's one number. And if you are in a tent or no tent, you know, you see people trying to roast their socks over an open fire, but it rarely works. So putting them in your sleeping bag with you, you'll get them a little bit drier, not a lot. So making sure that you account for that. Maybe you start the evening with warm socks every day, sleep in them, and then in the morning they'll still be pretty dry, but by the time you get done traveling, they're going to be pretty wet. Have a new set for the next day. Again, you know you. So they also sell vapor barrier socks. People who have really sweaty feet will find that that can be really helpful for keeping the rest of their layers dry. So you might do, you know, base layer, vapor barrier sock, and then the rest of your socks. Keeps your boots dry, but you'll be kind of wet in them. The important thing then is when you're done hiking, you take those off, let your feet dry out, get those dry layers on. A couple of the guys that I've gone winter camping with have found that to be really big savers for them as far as keeping their feet warm, because the rest of the layers don't get wet that way.